strength and conditioning professional requires constant pursuit of better knowledge, better methods, and better means. But what if there was a place where strength and conditioning coaches could learn from some of the most innovative practitioners in the world, such as Jeff Moyer, Lachlan Wilmot, William Wayland, James the Thinker Smith, and Keir Wenham Flatt? Well, you could find multiple lectures from each of these top-level coaches and a few lectures and examples from yours truly as well, all in the Strength Coach Network. The Strength Coach Network is going to bring you well over 100 different lectures from some of the top practitioners in the world to be your one-stop shop for your continuing education and professional development. So hop on over to strengthcoachnetwork.com/CVASP today and get your 48-hour trial for only $1. That's strengthcoachnetwork.com/CVASPS to get your 48-hour trial for only $1. I look forward to seeing you in the Strength Coach Network. Welcome to this week's Eccentric Minute, brought to you by Eccentric. This week's Eccentric Minute is an exercise we call the K-Box Break Squats. This is an exercise that's kind of modified from one that Chris Korfist demonstrated in his sensational presentation at the seminar. To set up the K-Box for this, we use a belt, and we're going to make sure that the strap is long enough for us to get into full triple extension, all the way up on our big toes. From there, we're going to sit into a squat and spin the wheel, and we're going to drive as hard as we can up. The goal of this exercise then is to keep our posture up, drive ourselves up as hard as we can, and then stop as fast as possible without our heels hitting the ground. What we love about this exercise is how it trains that braking force and for you to be strong in that stopping position to help carry over to change of direction agility drills. Give this one a try. I'm sure it's one that your athletes will love and definitely see how it can be beneficial to their performance. I really hope you enjoyed this week's Eccentric Minute. Make sure you check them out at eccentric.com to find out everything you need about the K-Box and the K-Pulley. Coach, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me on the show. It truly is an honor. So thank you.
Well, I'm excited to get down and kind of talk some of the basics and the fundamentals of like what we've all kind of been through in these building situations and these growing situations. But before we get too far into this, let's let everybody know who you are, where you're at, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Guillermo Blanco. I currently coach at McKendree University. I'm the head powerlifting coach and an assistant strength and conditioning coach here. Quite the journey. I definitely think it's a little bit different than the most coaches out there. They'll do an internship, they'll do a GA, then they get an assistantship, and then eventually, obviously, head position. Myself, a little bit different. Unlike most coaches, I don't have the collegiate athletic experience. I did play football and I did track in high school. I did have the opportunity to play at the Division III level. I decided that, it's time to hang up the cleats and kind of focus on academics. So I wanted to go the orthopedic, sports medicine route. That didn't pan out, and decided to focus on physical therapy. Went through all the prereqs and all that, and got the different experiences of working in different settings, volunteering. And again, that's something that, wasn't my cup of tea. And at the time, I was a student equipment manager for the football team at the University of Illinois. And the strength and conditioning coach knew who I was, gave me the opportunity to intern under him. And then, kind of from that year experience that I had with him, it was just something, hey, I wanted to transition into and focus. With that, went to University of Louisville and got my master's in exercise physiology. They had a strength and conditioning program there, and actually got to learn under Tina Murray. So that was an excellent experience, taking all those courses and everything with her. Obviously graduated, and while I actually did my my graduate degree, had an internship in the private sector, in the Chicagoland area. That's originally where I'm from, and at Acceleration Sports Performance, and got a job later on that year with them. Got to work with a baseball team, and then obviously groups of individual athletes, basically from 8 years old up until basically college age. Got to work with them, did that for a couple of years. And I had a colleague who knew that I wanted to get back into the collegiate kind of setting, and volunteered at a local university, Aurora University. Spent my time volunteering there for a semester. Fortunately, was brought on as an assistant, and got to work with a bunch of teams, at about 24 some teams, and basically worked with every team. That was a tremendous experience. And then was there for 2 years, and now I'm here at McKendree going on my third year. So lots of different settings that I worked in, high school, private sector, collegiate setting. And it's probably the one I enjoy the most, definitely.
But then in this situation, right, like a lot, I mean, and I was actually recruited to play Division II soccer back in the day. Like the Division II athletics is something that I think a lot of people overlook. Like, A, the quality of the kid that you're going to get as a player, and B, like the whole situation is completely unique. So let's get into a bit of the setup and how all the things work in that area.
Yeah. So being at all three levels before, I would definitely say, at least here, the D2 model is definitely similar to D3, in the sense that academics obviously are going to be a priority. So in terms of like scheduling and working around class schedules and work and this and that, like it's definitely a lot on the kids. But we work with them, we work with the coaches, getting them in and making sure they have kind of their team times. But there's still kids that are getting scholarships. They have a lot of talent across the board and in all different sports. Obviously size wise, like they're going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, a little bit faster coming in compared to someone at the Division III level. Not to knock that level at all, because I've been at it, and I think I would definitely want to do that again sometime down the road. A little bit different because they're required to be there by sport coaches. So, but at the same time, my goal is to make them want to be there. Because I do have a lot of kids that they come in as freshmen, never touched a weight in their life before, and maybe they have, and they just didn't like it in high school, or if they were like they had a separate trainer or going to a private facility, whatever it is. At the end of the day, my goal is to have them come in and want to be there and getting better at their sport. So that's definitely part of it in terms of differences.
And then an awfully large amount of teams to have to juggle while being a head coach of a unique college sport.
Yeah. So we have 30 some teams. I can't even count at the top of my head. I don't work with all of them, fortunately, because that would definitely be pretty chaotic and stressful. But I do work with women's lacrosse, men's and women's track and field, men's and women's tennis, cross country, and then men's women's golf, on top of powerlifting, which you brought up here. Definitely a unique sport, because their focus is obviously lifting. So I have to deal with all the ins and outs of any other sport coach, recruiting, any administrative work, on top of practice, which, I think in my end, like it's fun just because it's something that I do like as well. I'm still actively competing in that sport, and to be able to help some of these kids out and be able to teach them everything that I've learned up to this point and kind of build that program, build that culture on top of managing other sports teams. It has its challenges, but it's definitely rewarding because I do get to do basically best of both worlds, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. So now looking at the team, like this is really intriguing to me. How is that organized? Is it like a college thing? Is it a USAPL thing? Is it a different organization? How does that go? And then like, what's the structure like? Like when you look at like other sports that train for a meet, like track, like you work with, they'll still have competitions mid-year, but it's not like you can just plop a powerlifting meet 4 times during a semester to prep for the main one. Right? I mean, I wouldn't think, right?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of both. You touched upon it, both USAPL and school things. So a lot of schools don't recognize powerlifting as a varsity sport. It is here. There's only a handful across the country that do that within their athletic department. Most are just, clubs that are formed. For example, I went to the University of Illinois and they have a club team there. You got to join that club. Whereas here, like we're actively recruiting kids to come here. And then within that, we're competing within the USAPL. It's the most competitive organization at the collegiate setting. Basically, the goal that we're training for year in, year out is collegiate nationals, which is in the spring. So that's coming up for us here pretty soon in April. But we do have a handful of meets scheduled throughout the year to kind of get them ready. So obviously, like you mentioned, it's not like track where you could have a competition, every month or every weekend, because it does take a lot on the body. So in general, there'll be anywhere from 2 to 4 meets for the year. So we are kind of a year-round sport. If they're not competing in the summer, that's really their true off season that they have. If they're not, doing those 3-4 meets during the year. So
then how does that then impact what you do with the other athletes, right? Because I think that it's something that at times can be easily transferable, but almost as easily confused, where we're running down that rabbit hole with a cross-country team or some tennis kids,
Yeah. So, you might, I guess the stereotype of, oh, he's just a powerlifting coach because that's the first title that I have. But just because my powerlifting is focusing on the main 3, squat, bench, and deadlift, like I'm not doing that with my other teams. I'm training them to be athletes. I may keep it much simpler with some of those teams like cross country and tennis versus my track team or lacrosse team do a little bit different. But will we do some of those movements with those athletes? Absolutely. Maybe some more variations of it, but that's not like something that I'm hammering them about, because at the end of the day, they're trying to be athletic and they're just squat, bench, and deadlift. Like that's not going to cut it. They got to be able to move well
Right.
and do different movements. So
then let's talk about the powerlifting team, because you said you actively recruit. Let's talk about that process, because this is something, because strength coaches always say, well, like, if you want someone better, just recruit better athletes. And it's like, well, now we've got a strength coach who's recruiting. And the other joke, right? It's like, well, I mean, if you could recruit people that all benched great and squatted great, it'd be different. Well, Guillermo, that's what you do.
Yeah. And it's definitely not the easiest thing, especially this past year with COVID, just spending numerous amounts of hours, just phone calls, Zoom calls, FaceTimes, what have you. I as far as like recruiting, I'm pretty familiar with what states kind of have powerlifting organizations. So I'll kind of start there. And, there's some great databases online that I can search just to see kind of what kids have done. And then I think the challenge with that too is just, again, going back to those states, some of these kids have only done their high school organization. So there's no like football, there's huddle, you can't just put your game film up there. So I have to like search these kids' social medias and be like, do you have anything on there? See what their movement is like, their form and everything. There's definitely just different challenges. And then on top of that, just being able to try and connect with them. If they do have a coach, obviously talking to the coach, be like, hey, how does this kid work with you? If they don't, because some kids are doing it on their own, what program are you running? What are you doing? Especially, I think nowadays with social media, it's definitely helped and hurt the sport at the same time, in my opinion, just because, just being a young 16, 17, 18-year-old, you're going to want to follow what, the top 10 lifters are doing. And I guess what they don't understand is like they're kind of jumping around from program to program, and kind of all over the place, I guess. So, am I looking for the best kids to come here? Yes. But there's certainly a lot of other factors that I look into to see if they're wanting to come into our program. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just are they coachable? Again, if they do have a coach, just being able to talk to them and see what their personality is like. If they don't, that's kind of the challenging part. I don't really have any reference. I might be able to talk to their parents, but it's not like I'm going around and seeing kind of what they're like. So that definitely has its challenges. And then obviously the academics. For me as a sport coach, I think my number one priority is, do I want to win? Yes. But, they're coming here for an education, and I want them to, get their degree and have a good academic experience. So.
No, 100%. And I think that the ultimate challenge with that is that you're going to have kids who, if they haven't had a coach, think they know what's best and have been bouncing around trying to do whoever they see doing something crazy, or whatever Louis says to do this week. And not understanding that if you're 16 years old, like, you might not necessarily be ready for what they're doing.
Exactly. And, that's something that I tried to explain to them once they enter in our program. Now going on year 3 here, I think a lot of the kids who've already been here have a better understanding of kind of what my expectations are, what kind of my process looks like. Because I think, again, coming as a freshman, it's like, hey, I know X, Y, and Z. You might have been competing for the last 4 years, but in reality, that doesn't mean a whole lot. It's like there's a lot of ins and outs, especially if they've never competed in the USAPL. There's, again, so many technical rules and this and that, and it's like I have to deal with that, especially on meet day. Like, and then leading up to those meets, it's like kids want to max out, especially if they're newer to the program. It's like, no, we got to kind of leave some in the tank, let's save that for meet day. I believe Ed Cohn once said, you only have so many singles in your life. Why are you going to waste it on a training session? Leave it on the platform.
So when you're dealing with those types of situations, right? And I think that that's one that crosses into a lot of different areas. The whole idea of like kids need to understand at times to pump their brakes, and that doing what's cool might not be what's best. How are some ways that you worked with them? Because I mean, really, like what's different in your sport than other sports is A, it is the sport, and B, they're going to be handling loads way bigger than most college athletes when they're doing this. And you have some that are geared, so like even more.
Yeah.
You know, what then what are some strategies and some successful ways that you've been able to communicate what you just said to them? That we got to pump the brakes and save it for game day.
Yeah. I have to just reiterate to them, and it's such a cheesy thing to say, but powerlifting is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So what they do in practice is going to help them perform on meet day. But I always have to explain it as they're coming in, okay, we got to think what we're going to do in year 1 and then where we're going to be in year 4. I have a really good sophomore right now. He's put on tremendous numbers within just the first year, but he also has to understand that, okay, it's year 2 now. We had some of these huge, quote unquote, newbie gains. We're not going to be as successful that from year 1 to year 2, 2 to 3, we're not going to have the same amount of, gains that we did in year 1. Are we going to have them? Yes, but it's definitely not as going to be as big, just because now we're going to have to learn how to work with them and kind of individualize things even more to get them to get bigger numbers and handle more loads. So I've done that, and they're pretty good about getting that. It might take a few times for me to explain it to them, but it's not going to happen instantly. And I think, again, going back to social media, they want instant gratification. And powerlifting is definitely not one of those sports where, success or gains or any of that happens overnight. It's going to take a long time to keep doing it, especially with this sport. I tell them all the time, it's fortunately for them, they can do this after they graduate. Unlike other sports where they may only have 4 or 5 years to play it and then they're done. So.
Yeah. And I think that the next question / rabbit hole I'd like to run down is how do you identify those things? What are some ways that you identify how to individualize this work that you're doing with these young people? And then on top of that, how much does your own training career impact their willingness to listen?
So with them, I'll have kind of a general plan. I've had conversations with each one individually. Okay, where do we get stuck on this lift? Is it the bottom of the lift? Is it halfway? Is it towards the top? On a bench press. And then from there, I can, differentiate some of the accessory or supplemental lifts to put into the program. So, everyone might be benching on one day, but it might be different for each person individually. Just so I can, for my sake, it's okay, I don't have one person deadlifting, one person squatting, and another person benching, because then it's just chaos. Plus, from an organization and equipment standpoint, that's easiest. But then again, I'm individualizing that program. I would say, just for myself, I'll admit I'm definitely not a top lifter by any means. You know, I would say average. I mean, some of these kids are definitely stronger than myself. So, like, when I got my super heavyweight, like, out totaling me by like 300 pounds, they might be like, oh, well, coach isn't that strong. That might be their mindset. But, like I said, it's going back to them. Be like, I've had X amount of years of experience. I've done so many meets, and kind of know, like, what to do if we need to make any changes for you to improve, if we need to make any adaptations on meet day. And I learned that, kind of from my previous coach that I worked with, kind of how to manage meet day. And I think that's led to some of the success that we've had already in our program. So I think it just takes some of that experience for them to go through to understand it. Again, they're not gonna get that right away. But once they see, okay, coach knows what he's doing, not to toot my own horn, but then that's when, like, I guess the buy-in comes in. We talk about buy-in as strength conditioning coaches so much, but I think it's a similar process here, that it's going to take some time. It's going to take experience for kids to go through that and understand it. It's not going to be right away, and it's not something you can force on them.
Yeah, and I also think that meet day would probably be interesting as a strength coach, because more often than not, we're just the high five butt slap warm up guys. Like, you're not the individual actually dictating the whole thing and making sure things are rolling smooth.
Oh yeah, it's definitely has its challenges. I've told them, I'm like, I'd rather be competing, because when I compete, I have people managing me. They're wrapping my knees. They're seeing what the order is, like, in terms of how many people out till it's my turn. They're loading the plates for me in the warm-up room. Like, I'm just doing my thing, listening to music, and then when it's my turn to lift, I lift. Obviously, I do the same thing for them on meet day, but when I'm a one-man show and I have several lifters competing that day, it's definitely a lot harder. And then especially when we're up against competition, and just kind of keeping note of everyone else's lifts and just kind of seeing where we're at. And there is some strategy to that. It's not just like, oh, okay, this is what weight we're going to do. It's like knowing, okay, here's our opener, and then kind of going from there, having some backup plans if something goes wrong, that sort of thing. And just strategizing the entire day. So.
No, but that's cool, because that's totally different than what most of our normal game day routine would be.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, for them, they got a 2 hour weigh in, and then, you got to get them going, warming up. Again, I'm helping them out, trying to minimize any energy expenditure on their end, and just like, okay, go do that on the platform. It's a lot different, I guess, compared to other sports. So.
No, but it's cool. And I think that it's kind of like the antithesis of what the rest of us deal with, and where we're at, and what this little area in sport that we all love to work in it has come from, right? Is it's been really, a bunch of different people taking strength sport and somehow molding it to work in athletics, and people taking the good, the bad, the indifferent, and having their own twists and turns with it, however you may want to say it. And it's neat to see that they're finding more value in strength sport, that they're going to start to incorporate it in college level athletics.
Oh yeah. Um, I mean, just on the athletic side too, like I said, like I'm not going to train those kids like powerlifters. I'm gonna take some principles from the powerlifting side and apply it. And I mean, you mentioned strength sports, and you take some strongman stuff too into the performance side of things too. Obviously not all the time, but you can incorporate here and there carries and things like that. So just to make it fun. So
Yeah, 100%. And like, we don't even need to get into the weightlifting, rabbit hole with the snatch and the clean and jerk, which, I mean, that's just a whole other topic for another day. But again, it's another sport that has been utilized in performance since really like since Husker Power, right? I mean, that's where you could probably say a bunch of it started. But nah, man, I think that that's really cool. And I think that's an awesome, unique scenario and situation to be in. And I also think that what's cool is like, the fact that you do put out content with you training and you showing what, y'all do and everything. So where can people keep up with what you're doing, Guillermo?
yeah. So if you want to follow me personally, I have Instagram. That's probably where I put the most content on, but it's at Gmo68. And then my Twitter account, Coach G Blanco. If you wanted to follow the team, check us out, see what we're doing on Instagram. We're at McKendree Powerlifting, and then our Twitter page is at McKendree PL.
Love it, man. Absolutely awesome. Keep up the great work, brother. This is sensational stuff. I can't thank you enough for your time, and I love it, man. I love that you guys are growing the sport and doing great things down there, and I'm rooting hard for you, man, because this is really neat.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on here, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, man. Well, we'll be in touch real soon, Guillermo. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.